Also, too, in training camp, Mark Bali of the Athletic reporting. I mean, aside from the Steelers being denied to go to training camp, Panthers are holding joint sessions with the Ravens. On May 26th, NFL owners agreed to allow 90-man rosters to enter training camp 2021. They will first be cut down to 85 players on August 17th, a second to 80 on August 24th, and the final trip to the three-man roster on August 31st. And I think right now, like I said, I mean, listen, I think the stuff that's been going on in LaTrobe, still a head scratcher if you ask me, how they're not able to host it there with fans just yet. I mean, the only thing is, too, I mean, when you look at, I mean, some of the things out there, too, I mean, with training camp, I mean, what is really going to be expected right now, once again, at Heinz Field, UPMC Sports Really Complex? I mean, players trying to find a way to practice with more full speed. I mean, it seems likely that the Steelers, I mean, right now, it was unlikely that teams will come out with an empty injury report. Unlikely. But under a collective bargaining agreement, the first 3 days of training camp must contain no contact. Fourth and fifth days, players are permitted to go to speed and helmets and light practice gear called spires and shells. The sixth day is a mandatory day off, and when the seventh is when players will wheel pads for the first time in the off season. And I just feel right now, I mean, a lot of people look at it right now as a sign that what are they not doing right? How are they missing out? And why do they get to be denied? I think it's definitely hugely unfair. At the same time, I can understand why there's a little bit more to it. So, I mean, let's take a look at this a little bit harder too. Let's also get into this right now. I want to ask you real quick as we look at it. Big Ben Roethlisberger, his career. How should we remember Ben Roethlisberger? I mean, a guy who was given, I mean, 17 seasons in Pittsburgh so far, going into his 18th season. It's definitely incredible to think what he's been able to do. I mean, truly only playing 16 seasons. I mean, realistically. I mean, full seasons. But where does he rank at the end of the day amongst Hall of Fame quarterbacks? And once again, I know we get into this conversation a lot every now and then, but Ben Roethlisberger, is his career right now going to be defined as the one of the all-time great Steelers? And where is this place in NFL quarterback history, especially with his recent draft class of guys like Eli Manning and Phillip Rivers? I feel like Ben Roethlisberger at the end of the day. Listen, I mean, this is a quarterback. I mean, Steelers been needing to have obviously since Bradshaw, which took them about 2 decades. I mean, and everything he's meant to this club here. I mean, when you think of like all the years that the Steelers were defensively leading the way. I mean, post Bradshaw, even when Chuck Noll was coaching him, even to the transition of Bill Cowher, but the quarterback was like seemed to be the missing piece for quite a long time. I think if anything, when you think about this guy right here, I mean, a guy who has 156 wins in his regular season. I mean, 169 career wins, 83 losses, one tie. I mean, he's got 13 playoff wins, 9 losses, ranks 6th among playoff winning quarterbacks. Now you can say what you will. I mean, Corey. I mean, especially with the last couple of years, right there. I mean, since the end of the Killer B era, what has he really done since his last 2 Super Bowl appearances? I mean, him and Mike Tom will definitely be tied to the hip for a long time. But Ben Roethlisberger, in my opinion, his career, I think if anything, he has been a ginormous big game quarterback. I mean, more great regular season. I'll say at least, I mean, in fairness, when I evaluate things, I'll say definitely 60% regular. I mean, in regular season, 40% in the playoffs. I mean, the guy has definitely grown up and matured and one of the all-time greats. And he has been a guy that reminds you when he is injured, it's not that easy to go on life without him. Obviously, 2 years ago, I mean, without him, I mean, like I said, defense was clicking on all cylinders for the most part. I mean, they were carrying this team. I'm not so sure if he were to get hurt again this season. I mean, will he? I mean, will he? Will the team suffer without him? I mean, I think it's one of the only things too about Ben Roethlisberger. I think the biggest thing that continues to lack that goes against him at times is his total leadership. I mean, around like the locker room, in the media, I felt like he's been a stand-up guy. Outside of that, I mean, he's definitely had a lot of like maturing, even when they were winning those first 2 Super Bowls and those first 3 they were together. But Ben Roethlisberger, for the most part, I mean, listen, I think it's anything. He's definitely shown me more the last 2 years. I mean, he's been there more closer with his teammates. I mean, outside of guys like Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell, since they moved on, since they had to part ways. I mean, he has ingratiated himself more so being there, where it's communicating with them, standing on the sidelines with each other. Ben Roethlisberger, for the most part, he has a heart that still pumps and motivation to like still want to lead his team to championship caliber. Ben Roethlisberger, for the most part, when we truly look at it, I think, if anything, how he does having the first full year of rest on his elbow surgery. I mean, from recovering from his elbow. and what he can do with the weapons. I mean, will Najee Harris be enough to help relieve him some of those the passing on his arm and just be more creative, a lot more continuity. You got a guy like Matt Canada who seems to feel that maybe more trusted and input from Ben Rossberg be the way things will make it more rosier path. I'm not so sure about that. I think if anything, Ben Rossberger will do is this. Uh, I think he'll definitely be a lot more rested. But I think for right now, I think the biggest question right now is like who's going to go to more outside the running game. Is he going to continue that continuity with him and Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster, then Chase Claypool? Because the only thing is with Ben Roethlisberger, when I look at a guy, when he's locked in, he's locked in. But to be honest with you, too, listen, I think the only concern I have, too, like late in the season when you got your playoffs wrapped up, when they're, I mean, able to clinch as early as they did, I still think at times I'm not so sure if I want to necessarily rest for that final week of the regular season totally. At least still give me a few more reps. I think that's been my only takeaway I see with Ben Roethlisberger. I mean, he'll get rested, get ready for the playoffs. And when you truly, I mean, look at that. When he's had that luxury in such a long time, I mean, really, I feel right now. I mean, what he needs to do. I mean, the most part. I mean, when he is in that situation, he finds himself in. I mean, for the most part, I think he was successful. I mean, with it. I mean, was back in 2016. I mean, he's been 1-2 so far. I mean, one resting for the regular season and going into the, or excuse me. I mean, look at games where his team is rested and going into the playoffs. I mean, for the most part. He's been 3-2 in his career, whenever he sat out the regular last game of the regular season, and and going into the playoffs. So where do I think is Ben Roethlisberger as far as like big game performers? I think he's definitely number one on the Steelers all time in their quarterback history. I think if anything, I mean, when it comes to bigger games, I think I'd have to go with still Terry Bradshaw at the end of the day. Bradshaw was still remarkable in playoff games, throwing some big numbers. I mean, and not only that too. I mean, Terry Bradshaw has been the only quarterback to win Super Bowl MVP twice, and he's our only league MVP in history. And he did this at a time. I mean, more particularly too, when a rule was changed. I mean, in favor of the Mel Blunt rule, and where receivers were needing a little bit more room right there, and where the line or the defender was only able to tug one time. If it's anything beyond like 5 yards contact, illegal touching basically. So I mean, he was a guy who struggled for a majority of his career, and just to be able to all of a sudden, once you started picking up the offense from Chuck Noll, was able to go into his own and get more confident and just let it rip. I'm still sticking with Ben. Ride with him to the day at the end, and I think Ben Roethlisberger for the most part right now, I definitely would say he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I just don't see why he wouldn't be. I mean, when you look at a guy right now who's fifth in career wins ranked, fifth in win loss percentage. I mean, and then what he's been able to do. I mean, he's also one of the quarterbacks who was in the 60,000 yard passing. I mean, just the way he's been able to stay around too. Ben Roethlisberger has been a guy. Yes, he's been injured at times, but I mean, it's not. I mean, just his availability overall. I definitely put him over. I put him first, then Eli Manning, then Philip Rivers as far as his draft class. So let's go ahead. So for Ben Roethlisberger, I'm just gonna say a guy who could just endure. I mean, at the end of the day, when you look at his career when it's all said and done, a guy who could take on so much punishment, was able to make plays, it was able to extend plays, but I mean, wasn't afraid to lay it all on the line when his team needed him the most, and developed into a leader late in his career. That'll be the legacy of Ben Roethlisberger in my book. Aside from the two Super Bowls, when you look at the qualities.